Evening all, and welcome to the Weekly Biscuit episode 12, brought to you by Chocolate, the biscuit that did nothing wrong. Anyway, boy, what a week it's been. You see, I didn't know what the angle on the Weekly Biscuit was going to be this week. I didn't really find a humdinger of a news story until today. Today has provided me with a theme. Now, as you know, I've been watching me for some time. You'll know I take a zero tolerance policy over lying, deliberate lying. That doesn't mean, say, embellishing things, which I'm still down on, but I'm not as down as telling a deliberate lie in order to discredit others or to push your own agenda. But that's been the theme of this week. Now, I've been at a football tournament today with my sons, hence that's why I'm wearing the QPR shirt. They were playing down at their local club in a football festival. So I didn't log on to Twitter or onto the news or anything like that. I've just been in a media blackout since I woke up this morning. So when I get home about 5 o'clock, I find lots of people putting things on Twitter like, I opened up my postal ballot form and look what dropped out. And people putting pictures of tarantulas or keys to Volkswagens or anthrax powder as a joke. And I wondered, where did this originate from? And then I found out it was Dan Snow, the TV historian. Now, Dan Snow claims, he put out a tweet with a little photo, that he opened up his postal ballot electoral form and out popped a Vote Brexit Party campaign leaflet. And a lot of people believe this. A lot of people, particularly FBPE types, a lot of prominent Remain voters and campaigners like Jolyon Morn QC absolutely believe this. And you would think, oh, goodness me, this is terrible. Something should be done about it. If it wasn't for the fact that Dan Snow has previous form in lying, of course, because he lied to his daughters about women pilots in World War II. He said that women flew Spitfires in combat against the Luftwaffe in the Battle of Britain. And of course they didn't. Women did fly Spitfire planes, but their role was to deliver the planes from the factories to the squadrons at their airfields, freeing male pilots who would normally do that in the civilian capacity to do that, and to free the male pilots up to be fighter pilots, and women would take over the pre-war civilian flying roles. Okay, which is honourable enough. This is the 1940s we're talking about here. There were social limitations on what women were expected to do, but they were still flying, and that's honourable. But no, you see, what happens with Dan Snow is that he feels that if he tells the history straight and honestly, his daughters might become crushed, that their dreams, their ambitions will be curtailed. He is completely wrong on this. You have to put history in its perspective, because what if his daughters then went on for years to come repeating what he had said to them? They will fail history at school. They will fail history in higher education, and what will happen on the day when somebody brutally brings that fiction down to earth, dismisses it with facts. So he did them a huge disservice. But it shows that Dan Snow feels it's okay to lie to advance a greater cause. So when this story about the postal ballot form cropped up, that's what I immediately thought. Is he lying again in order to promote the bigger ideal? Because like a lot of people who are diehard Remainers, they see this as a kind of good versus evil, this struggle. And therefore, it's okay to lie if your cause is noble and just and justifies the means. So, as an aside, it's why I'm beginning to dislike what's considered one of the best Star Trek episodes of all time, which is the Deep Space Nine episode In the Pale Moonlight, because that covered the same thing. Is it okay to lie and deceive and to manipulate people if the cause is just enough? And I'm beginning to dislike the episode because I think in life, no, this isn't acceptable. But to people like Dan Snow and to Jolyon Maughan QC, it's okay to lie if the cause is noble enough. So I don't believe it. So, I mean, not just because Dan Snow has form in lying to pursue what he considers a noble end. It's because, let's just flip this around, okay? Let's say you apply for a postal ballot and the letter comes through your letterbox and you open it up and not a tarantula or anthrax powder pops out, but you get your postal ballot form and you get a letter from Guy Verhofstadt imploring you to vote for a pro-Remain political party in the upcoming elections. Let's say a Green Party leaflet pops out of your electoral ballot form. Now, what would you do? Right, particularly if you're somebody who's quite bright, a bit savvy, let's say educated, for example, what would you do? Well, you'd contact the authorities. Before you go to Twitter, you'd contact the authorities. Because if you are that committed to your cause, you've got something that's potentially damaging on your opponents. So you can call in the authorities and say, look, this happened. This thing got in my postal ballot form. This is electoral fraud. And if you go down the procedural route, you will get attention. You call the police, you call the Electoral Commission. You would go to the authorities because the story would break out eventually. The Electoral Commission will get this. It's a clear breach of rules. Maybe this has happened to other people. You won't be the first person. Electoral Commission, the police will say, if you have discovered compromising electoral material in a postal voting letter, contact us immediately. Okay, and you would go down the proper channels, because with the proper channels, as you know, our government is on the Remain side. The proper channels would clamp on this. You have the smoking gun. What you wouldn't do as your first action is to take some kind of quick photograph and immediately spread it out on Twitter, okay? Because now you've kind of compromised the legal effectiveness, by going to Twitter first before you went to the authorities. And as far as I know, Dan Snow has not gone to the authorities. Just put this out on Twitter, and useful idiots like Jolyon Maughan have just run with it. It must be true. FBPA just goes, it must be true. No critical thinking skills here. No kind of skepticism. So that's why I don't believe it actually happened, because you wouldn't just put it on Twitter and just hope the Twitter storm will do its work. Not in a case like this. So I don't believe it happened, and I believe it's another one of Dan Snow's attempts at the virtuous lie. Now, speaking of worrying tweets, David Lammy cropped up again this week. Oh yes, he's another one who's a gift who keeps on giving. Now, he put out a tweet saying that he was just full of his usual bile about Leave voters. But one thing he said in his tweet was that Leave voters had to be educated about the EU. Education, re-education. We are getting into serious Maoist, Stalinist territory here from David Lammy. This is just more of his hateful, it's sort of despising over half the country. He's at it again. He's just this massive race-based and shit stirrer. And his language of educating people. Now, I'm going to link this to something that a supposed conservative right-leaning journalist, Matthew Dancona, had tweeted out. I've never been convinced of Dancona's right-leaning credentials. I think he is a progressive left Blairite and always was. But he tweeted out, there was an incident where a man of Pakistani origin was assaulted and abused, and the moment was caught on camera. This white guy was just abusing this man of Pakistani origin. And Dancona said, this is what Leave has brought us to. This is what the somewheres are about. And he was just a bile-filled rant against Leave voters and the somewheres, sneering at them. And what I thought was daft about Dan Kona's little rant was that the man is from Pakistan origin, so he's not even from the EU originally. Okay, so if you're, it doesn't follow that if you are racist against people from Pakistan, why has that got anything to do with your attitude towards the EU? But it's the idea that if you're against the EU, that you're in favour of leaving the EU, that you think the EU is a bad institution, that makes you racist, because the vast majority, the biggest ethnic demographic of Europe is white. Okay, I mean, there's some countries in Europe where people of colour, the amount of people who are from, say, African or Asian ethnic backgrounds is so low it's almost non-existent. So how can you be racist against fellow white people? But this is just more nonsense from the Remainer crowds. I've never thought that the tag, if you're in favour of leaving the EU, you're racist. But Dan Kona does it, Lammy does it. It's just, I don't know if it's lying or if it's just a delusional mindset, but I know with Lammy that what he wants to do is, I think his end game is oppressing more than half the country. I think if he could institute an authoritarian Marxist state where if you had wrongthink, you would be sent to re-education camps, he would do it in a heartbeat, no doubt about it. Staying with the dishonesty theme this week, I received a campaign leaflet from the Green Party outlining their manifesto for the forthcoming European elections. And what struck me was a bit in there where they said the Green Party will listen to Leave voters and begin to heal the divisions in our society. And then on the following page they wrote they proudly declared that they were the most pro-European, pro-EU party in these elections, and that also they support the free movement of people. So you can see where there is a division, it's an irreconcilable division, because when they say we need to listen to Leave voters, well, they've had over 3 years to do that. In fact, I've long maintained that Brexit is nearly 30 years in the making. I think the moment the European community changed to the EU and the Commission openly declared that its aims were federalist, and that was all the way back 1991, 1992, they were saying this. Cat is trying to muscle in on the video again and knocking the light over. Yeah, it's all action on the Weekly Biscuit 12. So, oh yeah, that's the light switch. Okay, so, sorry about that. So, Brexit's been over 30 years in the making. That's my point. And the anti-European Union feeling has just been growing steadily and consistently since then. This is not a new phenomenon. People did not make up their minds to leave the EU on the day of voting, or even during the campaign. The feeling of unease and unhappiness with the EU has been building up longer. There are lots of people who voted to remain, but who still had grave doubts about the European Union and are not on board with the federalism project. But the Green Party say that they are. So what do the Green Party mean by saying we must listen to Leave voters? Leave voters have been very consistent. They've been consistent for 3 years. Some of us who have had misgivings for years, even decades, have been saying this. So what do they mean? We must listen. You've had ample chance, Green Party, if you're watching this. You've had ample chance to listen. And it's not like Leave voters haven't been sharing what bothers them about the EU either. It's there. It's all there. Right? Sovereignty is a key issue. The other one, free movement of people. The people who voted Leave And a lot of people in this country are very sceptical about the idea of complete free movement of people, because that leads to mass migration, vast economic migration that puts pressure on the receiving country, and there are effects on social cohesion as well. Now, always try and paint Leavers are saying that we're totally against any form of immigration. The vast majority of Leave voters are not against any form of immigration. They're against mass immigration. They're against mass immigration where there is no attempt made to try and integrate people into the nation and the culture that they're migrating to. And we're discouraged from assimilating people in because A, we got the multiculturalism theory, but B, because the EU don't think that, well, they regard all the countries of Europe to be nothing more than provinces, and that there's some kind of overarching European culture that just supersedes everything, and it just isn't there. So how are the Green Party going to listen when they've declared themselves the most pro-EU and totally in favour of free movement of people? How are they even going to begin to listen? What do they mean? Well, what they mean is that they're going to pretend to listen, and then they're just going to go, you silly lot. No, this is what you're going to accept. Bend over and take it up there. And finally, rounding off this week in lies, let's cover the ongoing thing about Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, and his election campaign. Now, I've been following just what he's been up to, and I absolutely love his meeting with people in public spaces videos. I love the series. I mean, I've watched all of them now, and I think it's a fascinating format. I would love to see more MPs or prospective parliamentary candidates do this, have their own YouTube channels where they go out and meet members of the public and answer questions. I think it's a great way. I think it's the future. I hope it will be. But in the meantime, he did an interview with Victoria Derbyshire. Now, last week, Victoria Derbyshire interviewed Jess Phillips about this whole thing of Carl's alleged rape tweets, promoting rape tweets, which was nothing of the sort. They were jokes where he said he wouldn't rape her or anyone else. But anyway, Victoria Derbyshire was just kid gloves with Jess Phillips. Oh, it must have been very terrible for you. It felt like an episode of Loose Women or some kind of school mums meeting up at Cafe Nero for a chin wag. That's what it was like. And should he be banned from standing for public office? Oh yes, that would be a good idea. So putting ideas into Jess Phillips' head, and no critical pushback or anything. But anyway, oh no, with Carl it was claws out, it was fire, it was searching for the gotcha moments. And he was just like swatting them aside and turning it back on her, making the point that had the media not put his original tweet into Jess Phillips' face, she wouldn't have known about it. And remember what I was saying last week. What happened was that he made those jokes. Okay, it blew up a little bit. 3 years, nothing. Now all of a sudden, it's an issue again. So Carl was doing a fantastic job of showing how Victoria Derbyshire was a hack, that she was being dishonest herself, and she just put on the petulant face. In fact, she started to resemble Guy Verhofstadt. That wobbling of the bottom chin that Verhofstadt does when anybody says anything he doesn't like. But for me, the crowning moment of that interview was the one where Victoria Derbyshire decided that she was going to read out tweets and emails that had been sent to the BBC about Carl Benjamin. Another contender for Didn't Happen at the Year Awards, where she was saying that Jess Phillips said that she was harassed by a man in the street who said, I'm going to rape you, or something, I don't know, something like that. And he said, I don't believe that happened. And then she read out all these tweets from people who claimed that they were sexual assault victims and how hurt they were by his words. And then Carl turned it around and said, "Funny, I was speaking to someone on one of my talks, and they were a rape victim. And they said how much humour had helped them, that kind of dark gallows humour had helped them process the trauma and help come to terms with it, desensitizing yourself. And I've had EMDR, which is the technique you use to desensitize yourself from a traumatic experience. I'm not going to go into what happened to me, but I had a traumatic experience back in 2001, and I went through EMDR treatment to help come to terms with it, and it absolutely works. And that's what I believe this young woman had done. She's a rape victim, but she had undergone some kind of EMDR, some kind of desensitization using humour, and she was praising Carl for doing that. And that was a brilliant moment, because he said on the Victoria Derbyshire show that he was approached by this woman, and you could tell Victoria Derbyshire going, oh yeah, did that really happen? The next day he releases the video of him meeting that young woman. Perfect moment, where he can prove and back up what he says, and Victoria Derbyshire can't. And I would just like, let's bring on down the lying class of the mainstream media. Let us find the good, noble, half decent, honest journalists who just go, I can't run with that story. There's no basis in fact on it. But we can, in the meantime, enjoy the humiliation of Victoria Derbyshire. That really does take the biscuit. It did nothing wrong.